The Lost Brothers Reunion. Welcome to MagicMingle's African storytelling series. Step into a world of rich traditions, wise lessons, and heartfelt journeys as we explore the magic of African stories. In this special series, MagicMingle brings you closer to Africa's vibrant culture, where every story is a pathway to wisdom and wonder, celebrating the importance of family, community, resilience, and hope. This tale, The Lost Brothers Reunion, follows two brothers separated as children who embark on a journey to find one another. Set against the stunning African landscape, this story speaks of the strength of family bonds, the courage to overcome hardships, and the joy of being reunited with loved ones. Through their heartfelt adventure, we discover that no distance can weaken the love shared between family. Join us on MagicMingle as we bring more timeless African folk tales to life. These are stories to inspire, uplift, and carry forward the spirit of Africa's beautiful storytelling tradition.
The Lost Brothers Reunion. Chapter 1: The Parting. In a small, sun-drenched village nestled in a valley, two young brothers, Tono and Juma, played beneath the shade of a tall baobab tree. Their laughter filled the air, mingling with the rustling of leaves as a gentle breeze swept through. Tono, the older of the two at 11, was tall and thin with a watchful gaze and a steady manner that made him seem older than his years. Juma, 2 years younger, had a playful spirit and an endless curiosity that led him to question everything around him. To the village, they were inseparable, two boys bound not only by blood but by a fierce loyalty and a world of shared secrets and dreams. But recently, the village had fallen on hard times. The rainy season had come and gone with barely a drop, leaving the once green fields cracked and barren. The rivers that once snaked through the valley had dried to mere trickles, forcing villagers to ration water carefully. Food became scarce, and as the days stretched on, hunger settled in like an unwelcome guest. Tono and Juma's family, like so many others, began to suffer. Their father, a once strong farmer, looked weary and hollow as he struggled to provide for his family. Their mother tried to reassure the boys, though her eyes showed her worry. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with hues of orange and red, the village elders gathered in the open square to discuss their dire situation. Word had spread that a group of traders would soon pass through, offering the village a chance to barter for food and water. But the traders were rumored to be offering a different proposition this time, one that brought a mix of hope and fear to the villagers' hearts. The traders, it was said, were taking young children to wealthier villages in need of labor, promising them food, shelter, and an education in exchange for a few years' work. For many families, this was a tempting offer, a chance to spare their children the pain of hunger and offer them a better life. But it also meant parting with their sons and daughters, possibly forever. The village elders debated late into the night, their voices low but urgent, as each family weighed the risk and pain of sending a child away. When the traders arrived the next day, the villagers lined the main path, clutching their children's hands, unsure of what to expect. Tono and Juma's father had already made up his mind to keep both boys with him, no matter the hardship. But as the traders set up their goods and began describing the lives that awaited the children in these distant villages, he began to waver. The prospect of sparing at least one child from the suffering was a temptation that tugged at his heart. One trader, a tall, stern man named Kamau, noticed Tono and Juma in the crowd. He approached their father with an offer, his eyes scanning the boys thoughtfully. "Your sons look strong," he said, his voice low but clear. "They would be well cared for in our village. They'd have food, water, education. One of them, at least, could have a chance at a better life." Their father's face grew tense as he listened, torn between his love for his sons and his desperation to keep them safe. Tono, sensing the weight of his father's silence, stepped forward. "Father," he said quietly, looking up with a steady gaze, "maybe it would be best for Juma to go. He's younger, and I can help you here." Tono's words, though brave, were thick with sadness. He knew that suggesting Juma go wasn't just an offer to help his family, it was a sacrifice, one that meant separating from his best friend and brother. But Juma, quick to understand his brother's intention, grabbed Tono's hand, his eyes wide with fear and defiance. "No. I don't want to go without you," he protested, his voice shaking. The idea of being apart from Tono, his protector and companion, filled him with a dread he couldn't put into words. Their father looked from one boy to the other, his heart heavy with the impossible choice before him. The trader, Kamau, watched this exchange with a hint of sympathy, but he did not press them. "Only one child," he said, his voice softer now. "The journey is long and difficult. It's best not to separate families more than necessary. But if you choose to send one, he'll have my word of safety and care." Their mother, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward, her face etched with worry but her voice calm. "Juma," she said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "My little one, I know you are scared. But maybe this will be a chance for you to grow strong and come back to us one day. Tono will be here, and so will we, waiting for you." Her voice trembled on the last words, but she steadied herself, looking to her husband for reassurance. He nodded, though the sadness in his eyes mirrored her own. Juma, feeling the weight of his family's love and their hope for his safety, looked to Tono, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. "I'll be here, Juma. I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes," Tono promised, his voice barely a whisper. They clasped hands, their eyes locked as if trying to memorize each other's faces, knowing that this might be the last time they stood side by side. As the traders prepared to depart, Juma turned back for one last look at his family. His mother was holding back tears, his father had his head bowed, and Tono stood tall, watching him go with an expression of fierce determination. "Remember, Juma," Tono called out, "we'll find each other again. Someday, somehow." Juma nodded, clutching his small bag tightly as he walked away, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. He would miss his family more than he could bear, but he held on to Tono's words, repeating them to himself like a promise. As the traders' caravan disappeared into the dusty horizon, the village returned to their lives, feeling the weight of absence as deeply as they felt the pangs of hunger. And every night after that, Tono would sit under the baobab tree, looking out at the vast landscape and whispering his promise to the stars above, hoping his brother would hear it wherever he was. Thus, the two brothers parted, bound by a promise and a love that even distance could not sever. Chapter 2: Lives Diverge. The years passed slowly in the village, and with each season that came and went, Tono felt the absence of his younger brother, Juma, like an empty ache. In the mornings, Tono often rose before dawn, as he had when they were young, sitting alone beneath the baobab tree where they'd once played. The valley remained dry, and every morning you watched the sun rise over cracked earth and bare fields. Since Juma had left, the village continued to struggle through hard times, yet Tono held on to the promise he'd made to find his brother someday. Life had changed for him as he grew older. His father, now aging and weary from the weight of so many poor harvests, depended on him more each day. Tono became the steady hand in the fields, managing the small crops that barely grew, carrying water from the far-off well, and looking after his parents. In these daily routines, he felt Juma's absence keenly, wishing his younger brother was there to share the burden. But Tono kept his promise to stay strong, both for himself and for Juma. Across the vast savanna, Juma's life had taken a different path. The traders had brought him to a prosperous village far from the drought-stricken valley he'd once called home. Here, life was vastly different, filled with the color, noise, and constant rhythm of a bustling town. His arrival had been met with curiosity by the villagers, who welcomed him warmly, intrigued by his soft-spoken manners and hard-working nature. An elder named Baraka took Juma under his wing, guiding him into a trade, and soon he became known for his skill in carpentry. Under Baraka's mentorship, Juma learned to carve wood into intricate patterns, creating tables, chairs, and tools with care and precision. Yet, despite the kindness he received, Juma often felt like an outsider in this new village. As he learned the names of new friends and settled into the daily life of his trade, he found himself thinking of his family, especially Tono, and the simple village he'd left behind. He held on to memories of long afternoons playing in the fields, his brother's steady voice promising that they'd one day meet again. Baraka, sensing Juma's longing, would often sit with him in the evenings, sharing stories of his own youth and the family he'd once left behind. "Our paths are often winding, Juma," he'd say gently, his eyes gazing out toward the horizon. "But those we love are never truly lost to us. Your brother, he is a part of your journey, even if you cannot see him." These words brought Juma comfort, though the ache to return home never truly faded. Years passed, and Juma grew into a young man, his skills as a carpenter widely recognized and respected. He found a new sense of belonging, becoming a trusted member of the village and even starting a family of his own. He married a kind and gentle woman named Amina, whose laughter was like sunlight filtering through the trees. They built a small home together on the edge of the village, where Juma often worked late into the night, crafting beautiful furniture and household items. Amina brought warmth and joy to his life, helping him to build a new sense of home. But Juma never shared with her the full story of his past, of the brother and family he still longed for in his heart. Meanwhile, Tono's life in their childhood village remained hard but steady. As the years went by, he grew tall and strong, his hands callous from the constant labor of farming. His family's small plot of land yielded barely enough to keep them going, yet he toiled each day with unyielding determination. His parents, who had grown older and frailer, relied on him entirely, and he took on his role with a quiet resilience. But as he watched other young men in the village marry and start families, he wondered what his life might have been like if Juma had stayed. The memory of his brother was both a comfort and a sorrow. Tono would sometimes imagine Juma at his side, laughing as they worked together, sharing dreams as they had when they were boys. He held on to a few keepsakes, like a small bracelet they'd woven together from grass, a childish token of the bond they'd shared. At night, he would hold the bracelet, thinking of Juma and whispering the promise he'd made years ago, "I'll find you someday." The two brothers led parallel lives, connected by the thread of memory and the promises they had made to one another. Though separated by distance and circumstance, they felt each other's presence in the quiet moments of their lives, as if a silent echo breached the vast distance between them. For Juma, life moved forward, filled with the satisfaction of building his own home and tending to his family. He and Amina had a son, a lively child named Imani, whose curiosity and laughter reminded Juma of his own brother. He shared stories with Imani about the village he came from, speaking in vague terms to avoid the sadness that lingered beneath the memories. He told him of a strong tree that grew by his family's home, of the games he'd played as a boy, and of the sounds of the distant animals at night. Yet, he kept his stories light, leaving out the pain of his departure and the longing he still felt for his family. One evening, as they sat around the fire, Imani turned to his father with bright eyes and asked, "Papa, you always talk about the people in your old village. Did you have a friend there?" Juma hesitated, his heart tightening at the question. How could he explain the bond he shared with Tono, the brother he had left behind but never forgotten? He felt the weight of all those years, all the moments they had missed together. "Yes, I did," he replied softly, staring into the flickering flames. "Not just a friend, but my brother. Tono." Saying his brother's name aloud after so many years felt both strange and comforting, like speaking to a long-lost part of himself. Imani's face lit up with curiosity. "Can we meet him? Can we go to your village, Papa?" Juma looked away, feeling the familiar ache return. He had always dreamed of seeing Tono again, of walking back into his childhood village and reuniting with the family he had left behind. But the fear of the unknown held him back. He worried about what he might find, about the changes that time would have brought to the people and place he remembered. "Maybe one day," he said quietly. "Maybe one day, we will go." But deep down, Juma knew that he couldn't let go of the promise he'd made to himself all those years ago. His love for his family in the new village was profound, yet it didn't lessen the pull he felt toward the home he had left behind. He felt, now more than ever, that a journey to his old village was inevitable, even if it brought unexpected truths or pain. Meanwhile, Tono was also beginning to consider his own journey. He had kept close ties to the village elders and spoke often with them, sometimes seeking wisdom on how to endure loss. One elder, in particular, an old man named Cato, had seen many seasons and understood the ways of the heart. "You carry your brother in your heart," Cato would tell him. "But maybe the time has come to carry yourself to him." These words struck Tono deeply. For years, he had felt that remaining in the village was his duty, a way to honor his family and keep his brother's memory alive. But Cato's words reminded him that sometimes love was best honored by acting upon it. He thought of his brother's last words as he had walked away with the traders, the promise they'd exchanged. It was time, he realized, to follow that promise, to seek out Juma and discover if their lives could still intersect. After a long night of reflection, Tono gathered the courage to share his intentions with his parents. His mother, though saddened by the thought of parting from her son, understood his need to find Juma. She wrapped him in a tight embrace, pressing a small token into his hand, a wooden bead that Juma had carved for her as a child, the one possession she kept close to her heart as a reminder of him. "Take this," she whispered. "May it lead you to him, wherever he may be." With his family's blessing, Tono began to make preparations for his journey. He carried little more than a small bundle of supplies and the wooden bead, which he kept in a small pouch around his neck. Saying goodbye to his parents was bittersweet, for he feared he might never return. But their quiet strength gave him courage, and he set off with a firm resolve, vowing not to rest until he found his brother. Juma, too, felt a calling within his heart. One night, after putting Imani to bed, he spoke with Amina by the fireside, expressing his desire to journey back to his old village. She listened with understanding, her gentle eyes reflecting his longing. "You have given us so much," she said softly, holding his hand. "But perhaps it is time to give something to yourself as well. Find him, Juma. Find Tono." So it was that the two brothers, bound by a bond that neither time nor distance could sever, began their respective journeys. Guided by memories and promises, each stepped into the unknown, carrying only hope, love, and a profound need to be reunited. Chapter 3: The Fateful Journey. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the open plains as Tono pressed onward, each step carrying him further from the comforts of his village and deeper into the unknown. He had been traveling for what felt like months, driven by the promise he and Juma had made as boys, and the wooden bead Juma had carved for their mother, resting against his chest, served as a reminder. In each village he passed, Tono asked if anyone had seen his brother. He described Juma's dark eyes and warm smile to farmers, travelers, and traders alike, holding on to the hope that somewhere, someone would remember him. But every village brought disappointment. Some shook their heads with apologetic smiles, while others listened with interest but admitted they knew nothing of a boy named Juma. Tono tried to stay positive, reminding himself of his promise and the bond he had with his brother, which he felt could transcend any distance or obstacle. Yet, as days turned to weeks, he began to wonder if he would ever find Juma. Some nights, as he lay under a canopy of stars, doubts crept into his mind, whispering that Juma had moved on, or perhaps forgotten him altogether. In the quiet moments, however, he could almost hear his brother's laughter and feel his presence as if Juma were walking beside him. Those memories kept him going, and he would clasp the wooden bead in his hand, grounding himself in his mission. Just a little longer, he would tell himself. Just a few more miles, a few more questions. Meanwhile, on a similar path, Juma was journeying from his new village, moving steadily toward the faint memories of his past life. Juma's world had changed profoundly since he had left home, and as he walked through unfamiliar landscapes, he tried to recall the details of the village he had grown up in. He remembered the small river they used to play near, the tall trees with branches perfect for climbing, and the red clay of the huts where he and Tono would hide during rainy days. But it was his brother's face that stayed most vivid in his mind, Tono, with his wide smile and the stubborn look he always wore when he set his mind on something. Juma encountered many villagers on his path and took every opportunity to ask about Tono. Often, people would listen kindly, perhaps sensing the urgency in Juma's voice, but none had any news. The journey took him through forests and over hills, and sometimes he camped under open skies, whispering his hope into the night air. He missed his wife, Amina, and his son, Imani, dearly, yet he felt they understood the pull that guided him on this journey. Every time he grew weary, he thought of how it would feel to reunite with Tono after all these years, to fill the missing piece of his heart that only his brother could occupy. One evening, as Tono trudged along a winding path, he came upon a small village nestled among baobab trees. The villagers here welcomed him warmly, offering him a place to rest and food to eat, which he accepted gratefully. As they shared a meal, he brought up the reason for his journey, speaking softly of the brother he sought. One of the elders, an old woman with wise eyes, listened closely as Tono spoke. After he finished, she touched his hand and said, "Sometimes, the ones we seek are on a journey to find us as well. Keep walking, young man, for the world has strange ways of bringing us together." Her words gave Tono renewed energy, and he left the village the next morning with his spirits lifted. He began to notice the small signs of hope around him, a gentle breeze that seemed to guide him forward, a bird that sang as if encouraging him, the light of dawn stretching across the sky like an invitation. He took each sign as a message from the universe, affirming that he was on the right path. Far ahead, Juma, too, encountered a similar sense of connection as he continued his search. The landscapes grew familiar, and he began to recognize certain plants and landmarks from his childhood. He found himself moving faster, his heart racing with anticipation. He sensed that he was close, though he did not know how or when he would find Tono. One day, while crossing a shallow stream, he stopped to drink and felt an overwhelming feeling of familiarity. In his mind, he saw himself and Tono as young boys, splashing in a stream just like this one, laughing as they played. The memory was so vivid that he looked up, half expecting to see Tono there beside him, as if they were still those carefree boys. As both brothers drew closer, fate intervened in the form of a small village that lay along a well-worn trade route. It was a place where merchants and travelers from different regions often stopped to rest and trade goods. Unbeknownst to each other, Tono and Juma were both heading toward this village, following paths that seemed to be leading them into each other's lives once more. It was evening when Tono arrived, tired but full of hope. He decided to spend the night in the village, thinking he would ask around in the morning about any news of Juma. The village was lively, with people exchanging stories, laughing, and sharing meals. Tono joined a group around a fire, where he heard stories from other travelers and watched as families gathered, talking and laughing together. The sight made him ache with longing for his own family and his brother, wondering if Juma, too, was feeling the same longing. That same evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Juma approached the village from the opposite side. Exhausted from his journey, he felt a strange pull urging him to stay the night. He was grateful for the lights of the village, promising warmth and rest after his long day. He noticed the lively gathering around the fire and decided to join them, hoping to ask once more if anyone knew of his brother. Neither Tono nor Juma knew how close they were to the reunion that had been years in the making. As Juma settled by the fire, he began to tell the story of his journey, of the brother he had left behind and had been searching for ever since. The listeners were captivated, their faces illuminated by the firelight, as they absorbed his tale of separation and hope. Meanwhile, on the other side of the fire, Tono listened intently, drawn to the voice that sounded achingly familiar. The way the man spoke, the tone of his voice, it stirred memories deep within Tono's heart. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the speaker, and as the man continued, realization dawned on him. "Juma," he whispered, his voice trembling, barely audible above the crackling of the fire. The man looked up, his gaze meeting Tono's across the flames. For a moment, neither of them moved, their expressions frozen in disbelief. "Tono." Juma breathed, his voice choked with emotion. The world around them seemed to fade, and in that instant, they were no longer grown men but two brothers, reunited at last after years of separation. The firelight flickered around them as they stood, moving toward each other, and then, in an embrace that held years of longing and love, they finally found the part of themselves that had been missing for so long. Their journey, though filled with hardship and uncertainty, had led them back to each other, and the bond between them, though tested by time and distance, had proven unbreakable. Chapter 4: Unexpected Meeting. The village was quiet in the early dawn, with only the faint sounds of stirring chickens and the gentle murmur of a nearby river breaking the silence. The sky was painted in soft pinks and oranges, and a cool breeze drifted through the village square, carrying with it a promise of new beginnings. As the villagers slowly began to emerge from their homes, two figures could be seen at the edge of the square, staring at each other in a moment of complete and utter astonishment. Tono and Juma stood just a few paces apart, still wrapped in the warmth of the firelight from the night before, their gazes locked as if afraid the other might disappear if they looked away. Tono felt his heart pounding in his chest, his mind struggling to grasp the reality of what he was seeing. Was this truly Juma, his brother? The face in front of him was older, more weathered, but beneath the changes brought by years apart, he saw the same spark in Juma's eyes, the same hint of mischief and kindness. For a moment, neither of them spoke, overwhelmed by the surreal nature of the encounter. The memories of their shared childhood, games they played by the river, stories whispered under starlit skies, rushed back to both men, filling the air between them with a warmth they had not felt in years. After a long pause, Tono found his voice, though it trembled with emotion. "Juma," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. "Is it really you?" Juma nodded, a smile breaking across his face as tears filled his eyes. He took a tentative step forward, as though testing the ground beneath him, and then another, until he was close enough to reach out. With a hand that shook, he placed his palm on Tono's shoulder, feeling the familiar weight and solidity of his brother. "Tono," Juma said, his voice choked with emotion. "I never thought, I never dreamed we'd see each other again." In that instant, Tono closed the remaining distance between them and pulled Juma into a tight embrace. They held each other, words failing them as they felt the weight of all those lost years melt away. It was as if they were once again boys, two brothers united against the world. The villagers passing by paused in curiosity, sensing the significance of the reunion and smiling at the sight of two long-lost brothers finally reunited. After a few moments, they pulled back, laughing through their tears. "You look older," Tono teased, wiping his face and studying Juma with an affectionate smile. "Not as young as the last time I saw you. And you look like you've been walking the earth since then." Juma replied with a grin, his eyes sparkling as he took in the sight of Tono. He noticed the bead around Tono's neck and touched it lightly. "I see you still carry a piece of home with you." "Everywhere I go," Tono said softly, holding the bead between his fingers. "It's kept me grounded. And I hoped, no, I knew it would lead me to you." The two of them settled on a nearby log, both suddenly exhausted but unwilling to separate just yet. Tono wanted to know everything about Juma's life, how he had survived, what he had learned, and how he had come to be here in this very village. Juma, too, was eager to hear Tono's journey and the events that had led him to leave their home in search of his lost brother. As they shared their stories, they found themselves laughing, reminiscing, and marveling at the paths they had taken. Juma spoke about his wife, Amina, and their son, Imani, with a warmth and pride that brought a smile to Tono's face. Tono could sense that Amina had brought a peace and balance to Juma's life, a steady companionship that had seen him through difficult times. "And Amina," Juma said, his voice softening, "she's the reason I even began this journey. I was at peace with the life we had built, but there was always a part of me that felt incomplete, a piece of my heart left behind in our village." She knew it too, and one day, she simply told me, "Go find him. Go find Tono." I think she always understood me better than I understood myself. Tono listened, deeply moved, and placed a hand on Juma's shoulder. "I have to thank her," he said earnestly. "She has given me back my brother." "And what about you, Tono?" Juma asked, looking at him with curiosity. "What has your life been like all these years?" Tono hesitated, his face turning more somber. "I searched," he began, his voice steady but tinged with a hint of sadness. "I wandered from village to village, asking about you, hoping that someone, somewhere, would know where you were. Sometimes the loneliness would hit me hard, and the only thing that kept me going was the memory of us as boys, of the promise we made to find each other no matter what." Juma reached out, taking Tono's hand in his. "I'm here now," he said quietly. "And I will never leave you again." The morning sun was now fully risen, casting a golden glow over the village as the two brothers sat together, absorbing the gravity of their reunion. As villagers passed by, some approached to offer kind words or to share in the joy of the moment. Soon, a small group had gathered around them, listening with rapt attention as Tono and Juma spoke of their journey and the years of separation. One elderly man, who had been listening silently, stepped forward with a smile. "It is rare to witness such a reunion," he said, his voice deep with wisdom. "Your bond is a reminder of the strength of family and the importance of never giving up hope. May you both find peace in each other's company." The brothers thanked him, and the villagers slowly drifted away, leaving them alone once more. Tono turned to Juma, his expression contemplative. "What now, Juma? What do we do now that we found each other?" Juma thought for a moment, then placed his hand on Tono's shoulder. "We go home," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "We go back to our village, to the place where we began. I want you to meet Amina and Imani. I want you to be part of my family, just as we dreamed all those years ago." Tono felt a surge of happiness and relief. "Yes," he agreed, nodding. "We go home." Together, the two brothers rose, feeling the weight of their journey lifting from their shoulders. They gathered their belongings and prepared to set off on a new journey, this time not in search of each other, but in celebration of their reunion and the future they would now share. As they walked side by side, a deep sense of fulfillment settled within them. They were no longer two boys separated by fate but two men, united by choice and bound by the love of family. The road stretched ahead, and with each step, they felt the anticipation of returning home, of sharing their lives and rediscovering the simple joys they had once taken for granted. In the end, the journey had changed them both in ways they could not have imagined, yet the essence of who they were remained. They were still, at their core, two brothers, forever connected, stronger together than apart. The world felt bright and open before them, and together, they walked into the dawn of a new beginning. Chapter 5: A Family Reunited. The sun was just beginning to set as Tono and Juma reached the outskirts of the village that Juma now called home. The golden rays cast a warm glow over the scattered huts, and a soft wind carried the sense of cooking fires and distant laughter. After so many years, it was a scene that Tono had yearned for, a place where he could lay down his burdens, knowing he had finally found what he had been searching for. He was coming home, in a way he had once believed impossible. Jumo's voice broke into Tono's thoughts, pulling him back to the present. "There," he said, pointing to a cozy hut with a small, well-tended garden out front. "That's where Amina and Imani are waiting. I told Amina about you in my letters, about our childhood and the promise we made. She always told me, your brother will find you one day, and now, here we are." Tono smiled, the anxiety in his chest easing with each step. He could feel the weight of the years falling away, replaced by the steady rhythm of hope and gratitude. He followed Juma closely, trying to quell the mixture of nervousness and excitement rising within him. This was more than just meeting Juma's family, it was a chance to share a life, to regain what he had lost and to find his place among those who loved him. As they approached the hut, the door opened slowly, and a young boy, perhaps 7 or 8, stepped outside. His large, curious eyes took in Tono, then flicked to Juma. A broad smile spread across his face, and he called back into the hut, "Mama. They're here." A tall, graceful woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a cloth. Her face was calm, but Tono could see the flicker of surprise and warmth in her eyes as she looked at him. She moved forward, embracing Juma first before turning her gaze to Tono. "So," she said, her voice as warm and steady as the evening sun, "you're the brother who kept Jumo's heart alive through all these years." Tono felt his cheeks warm as he nodded, his voice catching with emotion. "And you must be Amina. Thank you for caring for my brother, for helping him hold on to hope. I am in your debt." Amina smiled and reached for his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You owe us nothing, Tono. You are family, and family is home. Come inside. Tonight, we feast." As they stepped into the hut, Tono felt a wave of comfort and peace wash over him. The interior was simple but filled with signs of love and care: woven baskets, blankets folded neatly by the hearth, a well-used cooking pot over a small fire. The scent of spices filled the air, reminding him of his childhood, and he felt a surge of nostalgia that brought tears to his eyes. Imani, Juma's son, ran to Tono's side, wide-eyed with curiosity. "Are you really my uncle?" he asked, his small voice filled with wonder. Tono chuckled, nodding. "Yes, I am, Imani. And you must be my brave nephew." He ruffled the boy's hair, feeling a bond with the child that was both new and strangely familiar. Amina began to prepare a meal, her hands moving deftly as she mixed spices and stirred ingredients. Juma joined her, adding ingredients to the pot and talking quietly, sharing a laugh now and then. Tono watched them, feeling a quiet happiness fill his heart as he took in the warmth of this family, a family that was now his too. They shared stories around the fire that night, laughter ringing through the hut as they passed around bowls of food, savoring each bite as though it were a gift. Tono told stories of his journey, of the many places he had seen and the people he had met, his voice animated as he recounted the tales that had kept him going over the years. He kept Imani wrapped with stories of distant mountains and rivers that sparkled in the moonlight, of kind strangers and surprising acts of friendship. When it was Juma's turn, he spoke about the family he had built, of Amina's kindness and resilience, of Imani's spirit and curiosity. He shared the joys and challenges he'd faced, each word filled with gratitude for the life he had created. And through it all, Juma said, his voice thick with emotion, "I never forgot the promise we made, Tono. I never forgot you." They sat together, the fire crackling softly, lost in memories of their shared past and the hopeful future they could now look forward to. Amina placed a hand on Tono's shoulder, her face full of understanding. "Tonight," she said gently, "we honor your journey. Tomorrow, we welcome you fully as one of us." As the evening wound down, Amina and Juma shared glances, a plan quietly forming between them. "Tono," Amina began, "we have a tradition here for welcoming someone home. We call it the Dance of Reunion." Juma nodded, explaining further, "It's a dance that symbolizes the joy of finding what was lost. I think it's time we dance for you, my brother." Tono felt a lump in his throat as he nodded, deeply touched by their thoughtfulness. The villagers, having learned of Tono's arrival, began to gather, filling the hut and spilling out into the moonlit night, all eager to welcome him with open arms. A drummer began to play a slow, rhythmic beat, the sound echoing through the air like a heartbeat, steady and strong. Amina took Tono's hands, guiding him to the center of the gathering. She started to move, her steps graceful and deliberate, and soon Juma joined, his movements mirroring hers as they danced in unison. One by one, the villagers joined in, creating a circle around Tono, each step a celebration of his return. As he danced, Tono felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, the rhythm of the drum echoing the steady beat of his own heart. He looked around at the faces of those around him, faces filled with joy and acceptance, and he felt something settle deep within him. He was no longer a wanderer, he was a part of this place, a piece of this family, and he felt a peace he hadn't known for so many years. When the dance ended, Juma pulled Tono into a tight embrace, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Tono laughed, his heart brimming with happiness. He realized now that he had not just found his brother, he had found a community, a family, a place where he belonged. It was more than he had ever dreamed of, and he felt gratitude so profound that he was rendered speechless. The villagers stayed long into the night, sharing food, laughter, and memories with Tono. He felt as though he were a puzzle piece that had finally found its place, fitting seamlessly into the vibrant tapestry of this community. In every smile and every welcoming word, he felt the years of loneliness slip away, replaced by a love and acceptance he had longed for. As the night wore on, Tono found himself sitting by the fire, Imani nestled against him, fast asleep. Juma sat beside him, his arm around Tono's shoulders, a look of deep contentment on his face. "You know, Tono," Juma said quietly, "this is what I've always wanted. You, here with us, as a family." Tono nodded, his heart full as he looked at the faces of his new family around him, faces he would come to know and love. He took a deep breath, feeling for the first time in years that he was home, truly and completely home. In the glow of the firelight, Tono's journey had finally reached its end, not in solitude but in unity, not in longing but in fulfillment. He closed his eyes, resting in the embrace of family, a family reunited at last.
Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe and share our channel Magic Mingle with your friends to enjoy more magical stories.